Hello and welcome to the Best of Three podcast. I'm your host Daniel and I'm joined today by Vladis and Tom. How are you doing, guys?
Doing well.
Good, thank you.
Excellent. So today we're going to be talking about preparation for the UK Open 2. So Tom, you were at the last Open. What exactly is an Open?
It's basically just a really big regional. The previous one was up in Huddersfield, and the one that we're about to come up to is in London this weekend on Saturday, the 20th of January. It's like a regional, but it has bigger entry and better prizes. So first prize will be a trophy, a PlayStation 4 Pro, and a case of boosters. Everyone in the top cut, I think, will be getting at least a box, and then even half a box down to the top 16, alongside the standard regional prize support with the mats and the deck boxes that you get at a smaller regional. With it being so large, and I'm expecting that we'll probably see around 200 players, it's likely to be 8 rounds of Swiss with no top cut, which is the same as what you'd expect from a YCS day one. So it will be very long, and you'll get fatigue coming in at the end of the day. Now, it'll be the last chance for people to play in a big event like this with the current decks that are around before Extreme Force comes along at the start of February to completely change the format.
Yeah, so we're going to be seeing a massive event in the UK, really. I hear that there are people traveling from pretty much all over Europe to it. So hopefully we will see a good turnout, probably 250 players, maybe. But yeah, so as you said, we're going to see a big meta shakeup. So before that, what 3 decks do you guys think we're going to see going into this event?
Right. We pretty much the format's kind of been solved already, where the big 3 decks, if you will, are Trickstar, Spiral, and Pendulum Magician. Pendulum Magician kind of being more, it's kind of fallen off after the past like month and a half or something like that, where every like kind of list is playing cards that already beat Pendulum Magician. So like people aren't really playing it as much.
The main
But
standout there being evenly matched, right?
Yeah, exactly. Evenly matched is just such a powerful card, and the fact that like you have to play hand traps to beat Spiral also hurts Pendulum Magician, because playing more hand traps in the Pendulum Magician deck makes it a lot more inconsistent, because you kind of just want to open a hand of Pendulum monsters and then Pendulum summon out your board, whereas it's kind of hard to do that going second against a sleeper. So
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
I think
definitely...
Pendulum Magician have certainly been struggling recently. They only got one of the top cut slots at YCS Melbourne last weekend.
Yeah. Apart also from Melbourne, there's tech choices from it, but so before that though, we want to talk about like kind of like the decks in detail, kind of. So first, like just say Trickstar. Trickstar's kind of been a more popular deck recently. It's somewhat easy to play. It's like really kind of casual friendly as well. The deck's like quite strong. It's quite consistent. It has a lot of room for a lot of like tech cards, because the engine is so small that you can just fit in like all these like hand traps. And then even with the new developments in the format, you can play like seeing play from Melbourne. A whole group of people I heard were playing it, especially the person who won as well. And then it's quite solid. It's like stupid like burn FTK type things you can do with like and as some people say, it has a really strong Spiral matchup. Some people say deck is awful and can't get over 1800. And then we've got Pendulum Magician, as we said before, really weak. And then we've got Spiral.
No, yeah, you say Trickstar has a strong Spiral matchup, but anything that wants to compete right now has to have a strong Spiral matchup, because we're seeing them really dominating the top cut of every single event. Again, at Melbourne, they had 22 of the top cut spots.
Yeah.
They're obviously the strongest deck around, and by virtue of that, they're going to be the most represented. So you need to be prepared to deal with Spirals.
Yeah, and Spiral's kind of in a weird state as well, because a lot of people choose to go second with the deck, which can also open room for people to play like a going first version of the deck. where you just play like you can maybe play trap cards if you really wanted to. The new trap holes like Floodgate trap hole that I've been seeing playing Bottomless trap hole. And then you'd also just be trying to make boards, whereas this kind of the blind second spiral deck just plays a lot more hand traps and would just basically just try to break your board and then establish its own one to be able to just win the game like that way.
I mean, isn't going second? It's not as much trying to break your board as it is trying to prevent you from building the board in the
Yeah,
first place, right?
yeah, that too. But it also is playing like 3 copies of Tough. So if you're playing against something that isn't the Spiral Mirror, for example, you can just go, like summon Tough, try to pop your back row or your monster even, and then you summon an agent, and then you try to, hit another one of their cards. And if they cherries you, you're kind of in a fine position. Whereas the going first barrel build would be like a lot harder to break through cherries because you'd already have gone maybe rid of 2 of their cards with the going second spiral deck. So if they cherries you, they're just kind of like negging even more. So you can just like try grind through the game like that
You
way.
just beat them up with like a decode talker.
Yeah.
So
I
out of those
think
3
that
decks, guys, which ones would you feel most comfortable on for the weekend?
I think Spiral is certainly the best one to be on right now. But you need to have your technical play sorted for a whole selection of matches. I think the deck plays very differently depending on whether it's a mirror match or playing against anything else. If you're playing against anything else, you just want to get your combo out there and dominate the game from the get-go. But in the mirror match, it's very much a case of you don't want to be the one to push first unless you know that you've got the kill that turn.
I mean, you can also try and get a read that they don't have the cherries, right? Because the probability of cherries is roughly between 30 and 40%, right?
Yeah, something or other.
Yes, cherries being the toughest one to play around because by nature of having to control more monsters than your opponent to get cherried, you obviously can't play around it with Gamma, which is seeing a lot of play right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of I feel that between Gamma and Cherries, they definitely provide the kind of interesting interaction in the spiral mirror, which leads to players just passing because you can't interact with their spell cards really in case they have the Gamma, but they can't put out monsters in case you have the Cherries. And so
Yeah.
you end up with that kind of awkward dance where you both just stare at each other, drawing cards and setting missions.
Yeah, nobody wants to commit until they know that they've got everything that they need and some protection to boot.
And what do you guys think of Trickstar? Because Trickstar definitely forces players to play very differently in a similar way to the Spiral Mirror.
Trickster's a really weird one because if you don't know what you're doing, you can literally just lose the game outright. But if you do know what you're doing, it can be really tough for like Trickstar to just win sometimes. Like if they don't have like a lot of ways to just interrupt the plays you do.
I think there's also a big problem in the Trickstar deck, as was mentioned earlier, in the attack barrier. They struggle to put out anything bigger than 1800. They naturally need to go into the extra deck because Candina is the top of their attack curve. And when Spiral is making up such a large proportion of the metagame with 5 or even 6 1900 attack normal summons, it can be really difficult for them to put anything through.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of a rough idea of the decks. We haven't really talked about Pendulum Magician. From my point of view, going into the weekend, it's kind of the most consistent, but the most easily outed. Would you guys kind of agree with that, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah. The problem with like the Panel Magician deck is it has like kind of like tech cards, which in the current format we're in. And apart from just the deck being like way too many things to I think just like be able to stand a chance.
They're just waiting on Heavy Metal Foes
Yeah.
Electromite at this point. That card is going to do really big things for that deck, but until it comes out, they're in a tough place.
Yeah, that's completely fair, guys. So finally, what do you guys think are the top 3 tech choices for the event?
Right. So, coming from Melbourne, we got a lot of new tech cards. But specifically, the 3 we want to mention is the Trap Holes, Bottomless, and Floodgates we mentioned previously. Really, really strong cards, really underrated cards for the Spiral Mirror match, because what usually happens is they summon a tougher agent, and if you bottomless it or Floodgate Trap pull it, it means they can't use Big Red or the Spiral Mission Rescues to bring back those Spiral monsters, basically just ending their turn. Alongside, you can go bottomless on Sleeper, which is a super strong play, and also on Helix. But the negatives about like Floodgate Trap Pull specifically is that it doesn't hurt Link monsters, and it can be quite hard to use them going second, so they're kind of restricted to just being only sided in when you go first.
Floodgate's an interesting one in that whilst it can have some restrictions in that it doesn't hurt Link monsters, it has really big applications against some of the rogue decks. For instance, if we start seeing Lightsworn coming out, you flip a Floodgate on their first summon from the extra deck, you can completely lock them out of the game by having something set in that extra monster zone.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if it's something like Gem Knight Seraphonite, which basically just makes it so they're not really playing much.
I feel that Floodgate suffers somewhat in the format due to the fact that Spiral plays a tribute summon monster, right? Because
Master Plan.
Yeah, if the deck didn't play Master Plan, Floodgate would just completely lock them off the card that you Floodgate for the rest of the game. I guess they also have Last Resort, right? That they can technically send it to the graveyard.
Last Resort too.
But that's very roundabout.
Another key thing with the trap holes is, seeing as people are now actually playing trap holes, there might be a space to play Trap Tricks or Rafflesia, although one of the problems with it is it's kind of like weaker than Baguska in the sense that Baguska actually has a high attack value to be able to get over like Tough and like Agent and Helix, whereas Rafflesia kind of just sits in defense mode all the time. But it's still kind of a consideration if people are playing trap holes. You might be able to fit in Rafflesia somehow, just to make it so you can send those trap holes from deck easier.
On the point of the trap holes, it's very important to note that the reason the trap holes are so strong in the format, and why we're not seeing cards like Mirror Forces and Psalm Warning and Strike, is the fact that trap holes are reactive. So it's the fact that as soon as they put the threat that could remove your back row, you're able to use your back row on the threat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to wait until the setup of the turn is completely done and they start going to the battle phase to do the attacking. You want to be interrupting the threats like double Helix before they get the effect off to summon the master plan, rather than after they've gone through the whole motion of the combo and got to the attacking. At this point, for particularly decks like Spiral, attacking is just the way that the game ends once the winner has already been decided.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually leads us nicely into our next tech choice.
So
Ghost Jack Frost.
This is probably the funniest tech card that has arisen probably ever in the game, I wanna say. It's been like probably one of the first and maybe only times in the game's history where Ghost Trick Jack Frost was a legitimate and not a joke card in people's side decks. So if for those who don't know what Jack Frost does, it has the same thing as every Jack Frost, where it can't be normal summoned unless you have a Ghost Trick monster on the field. But the relevant effect we want to focus on is when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can change that monster to face down defense position, and if you do, summon this card from your hand face down. So basically, you can probably tell where this is going. It's basically an out to Sleeper, because what happens is in the Spiral Mirror match, how it basically goes is if you make you go first, you probably just pass. But what can happen is if they go second, they can probably just go like Drone Agent and kill you. So to be able to basically fix that is you just go Jack Frost on their Sleeper, and then it basically blocks 2 attacks. Alongside that, you can also side it in against Trickstar. So when they attack with, let's just say, like Licorice, you can special summon it face down and then block 2 attacks that way.
Yeah, particularly in the thing there. Now, I mentioned before that a lot of the time the attacks are just finishing the game once the winner has been decided. Jack Frost is a card that can shake that formula up. Even a player that resolves their board, has the 8,000 ready to attack, if they end up attacking into a Jack Frost, that can be the survival line that you need to stay in that game. put the sleeper face down, lock it out of the next turn, and completely spin the game around.
Yeah, the only one of the only problems with Jack Frost is though, once people know that Jack Frost is a card in the meta, they can just start making a bunch of link monsters instead, and then to make it so Jack Frost is basically useless.
Or are they just don't
Yeah.
attack with their sleeper, and
Yeah,
you have
that
to
too.
hold the Jack Frost for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you like to bring in our final tech choice for the weekend, Tom?
Yeah. So Book of Eclipse wouldn't suffer that problem that Jack Frost might do if people start playing around it by not attacking with the sleeper. It's in a similar position where it's a non-targeting, non-destroying removal piece to deal with the Spiral Sleeper. It has to be set to be able to use it on your opponent's turn, but useful in that playing either first or second, it's a piece of interaction that can down their play when they try to make it, or turn off the sleeper before you make your play. So it slots in very nicely as a versatile card that's excellent for both the going first and going second spiral builds.
Yeah, I mean, there is the one fear with Eclipse, that if the opponent does have Ash Blossom, they can negate its effect, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it can be negated with Ash Blossom, but you can also get some value in those situations by using it potentially to bait out an Ash Blossom before you try and make your play, if you have another way of dealing with whatever threat you were trying to deal with the Eclipse.
Yeah, and so what are you guys' thoughts? Because we see Floodgate Trapple and we see Book of Eclipse both kind of rising to prominence again. And if you think back, the most recent time we saw those before now was nearing the end of Zoo format. So do you guys have any thoughts on how we're kind of seeing the same tech choices appear again and again?
I think they're certainly cards that you want to get a hold of and own a set of, because this isn't going to be the last time that we see them. One of the most remarkable things is that all three of the tech cards that we've pointed out for this format rely on the mechanic of changing monsters to face down defense position. And in a format that's dominated by link monsters, the fact that these have still shone through really shows the power and the dominance of Spiral Sleeper in the current format.
Yeah, I mean, it's partially a combination between Sleeper and the fact that Resort prevents targeting, right? Because if we could
Yes.
target with our trap cards, it would probably be a very different format.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah, you might
well,
even see decks like Paleozoic coming through if we
Yeah.
weren't constantly shut down by the Spiral Resort.
yes, that deck is very hurt by not being able to target. Do you guys have anything else you want to add?
I don't think I have anything else to add. I think we've talked about most things we need to talk about.
Look forward to seeing anyone at the UK Open. Should be a fun event.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Gladys and I will be flying over.
we'll all be there as well. Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much, guys. We will hopefully see you all at the UK Open. And otherwise, best of luck in your tournaments this weekend. I'm Daniel. This was Vladis and Tom. We're the Best of Three podcast, and we will catch you guys next time.